All right. Looking forward to the NBA postseason, and I'm looking forward to this. Jeff Benedict, New York Times bestselling author of 16 books, TV and film producer, and executive producer on the HBO documentary Tiger, which was excellent. And I have his new book, which, being the Heat fan that I am, immediately recognized the cover. But I did have to check with Jeff in the break that I was right about this picture. It is LeBron, and it covers his life from Akron all the way to becoming the NBA's all-time leading scorer. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to talk about this with you.
Thanks for having me on, and had to pick that cover because that's when he was at the Zenith.
Oh my God, yes. Yes, correct. So I read the first chapter already, and you start with the decision, which, as I'm reading it, I'm going through the emotions that I experienced with the decision, which was so different than everyone else in sports experienced because, well, he came to my team. So I loved it. I think it's great. And as a Heat fan, I'm living in Miami. I mean, we like all that. We like all the stuff. But everyone else doesn't relate to that. So I had a very different experience with LeBron and the decision. Looking back on the decision now and writing about it, how did you feel about it? Because I think in today's society and with today's sensitivities, I think the decision would be received very well.
Yeah, it's a great question because there's so many different ways to look at the decision. And when you're writing a book like this, where you're capturing an individual's life, the biggest question you face is, where do you start? Where do you bring the audience into that person's life? And to me, the decision was the most natural place to begin because it's the first time in LeBron's life that he really experiences venom and ire and, pure hatred over this decision. And it's not because he did something immoral or criminal he made a decision to choose one team over the others. And the way he chose to announce it just roiled up the NBA and the sports world in such a way that I thought it was a really critical turning point in LeBron's life and in his career. But when you look back on it now, it is interesting what that decision brought for him. It was the beginning of athletes really taking control of their own narrative. And now with social media and all the other ways there are for athletes to get their message out, we almost take that for granted. But in 2010, this was revolutionary for him. It was bold. It was in some degree scary, but he went out there and did it. He took a tremendous amount of flack for it. But it really was the launch of really what I consider the second phase of his professional career and the beginning of the championship run.
So, Jeff, I thrive as a villain. So I was loving every second of the hate and the bitterness and the reaction to the Miami Heat getting LeBron. But there was a point throughout that situation that I took a little step back, which for me is a lot to do. But the press conference at what the time was American Airlines Arena with Bosh, Wade, and LeBron, and the not one, not two, not three infamous quote about how many championships they were going to win was the moment that I was like, oh, this is about to turn up for real, because they have never played together. Like, they have not dribbled the ball on a court in NBA games together yet. Like, the expectations are already kind of high for this team. So let's just maybe, let's just not add that to it. And of course, that's still a notorious quote to this day. So what was the turning point for LeBron with the villain era, which was the time with the Miami Heat, where it was like, okay, I'm ready to go back to Cleveland? Do you cover that in the book?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a couple things that, keep in mind from a perspective. This thing wasn't scripted, meaning there wasn't time for LeBron and Wade and Bosh to script out what was going to happen that night in the arena in Miami. I mean, LeBron went from Greenwich, Connecticut in a private plane to Miami, landed in the middle of the night. And, the next night they're in the arena in Miami. There wasn't time to plan this properly. People didn't go over what they were going to say. Pat Riley sitting in the arena watching this and seeing it kind of, because it's unscripted, Riley's watching this going, whoa, here we go. And I think that the interesting thing to me, Joy, is that in the conversation with LeBron and Michael Jordan, it's always about championships and who has more. When LeBron was in Miami, he had every opportunity to stay there. That would have been the natural thing for him to do, and go on and win more and more and more championships. They were built to do that. They went to the finals all 4 years he was there. They won 2. And Riley's big argument to keep him in Miami was, we're primed to win a whole bunch more. And I think we can all agree now that had he done that, he would have won more championships a lot easier than the path he took. He took a much harder path by going back to Miami. And it's one of the things that distinguishes him from all of the other greats was he was driven by something else. That commitment and loyalty to Ohio is what brought him back. And that harder path was something that I think you have to take into account when you think at the overall legacy of LeBron James.
So, Jeff, my overall thesis on LeBron James as an individual is that he is the greatest superstar we have ever seen in the history of sports. And I argue in the history of our country. When you consider that he has been on our radar since he was a child to now a whole family man into the legacy era of his career, the NBA's all-time leading scorer, we've watched all phases of this. And his brand, how he handles his business, how he handles his family, how he handles the media, how he handles fans. He's been dealing with social media. You've written books on Tiger and Tom Brady. Like, it's just fascinating to me how he is controversy free. Like, the biggest controversy is that he set up a interview with Jim Gray to announce where he, rightfully so, could choose to take the next step in his career and also raise $5 million for the Boys and Girls Club while doing it. That is incredible. That's incredible. I mean, it's incredible to me. He is the greatest superstar we have ever seen in the history of sports, and I argue ever.
Well, I think it's when you look at LeBron, you have to, again, it's about perspective. He's not just an athlete, and not to say that a great athlete isn't a great thing, but LeBron is so much more than a great athlete. He is a world-class entertainer. He has been selling out arenas since he was 16 years old. I mean, that's just in its own right an amazing thing. He learned how to deal with fame and pressure and expectations and visibility as a really young man. There's one chapter in this book that, to me, one of my favorites is called Get in the Car. And that's when LeBron's a junior in high school, and Grant Wall from Sports Illustrated comes to his high school to try to convince him to let the magazine do a profile on him. And it might end up on the cover. And he's got like 30 seconds to make his pitch to LeBron in a locker room. And LeBron's looking at this total stranger, and he doesn't go to his mother for advice. He doesn't go to his coach. He doesn't have an adult in the room to advise him on what to do. He's got to make an instinctive decision. Should I trust this guy? Should I literally get in Grant Wall's car and take a ride with him? And it changes his life. And I think that LeBron has over and over made decisions in the moment that have changed his life and enabled him to become this incredible world-class entertainer.
How do you think people will remember LeBron James? Because I grew up idolizing Michael Jordan. And because
Sure.
I grew up in a time where there was no social media and there was not the amount of coverage and access to superstars that we have now, I argue that the stars of my childhood kind of exist in a bit of a fantasy because we don't have all of the receipts that we have now when we cover people because of these new technologies and the access and the coverage and outlets. So people have very different experiences with stars now. So how do you think LeBron will be remembered?
That's a great question. I think in a way it could end up being very much like the fairy tale dream that I think LeBron had when he was a kid. He liked superheroes. He liked Batman. He thought he could never be Batman because, for a lot of reasons, but he's kind of become that. He's so much more than just a basketball player. He's got this sort of superhero status that he's built over the last 25 years. And I think he'll go down in history two different ways. As a basketball player, he'll be looked at as the greatest scorer in the history of the NBA and the one player who was able to win championships with three franchises. Michael didn't do that. Bill Russell didn't do that. Kobe didn't do that. Larry Bird, Magic, none of them did that. LeBron did that. But we'll also look at LeBron as something else, this major cultural figure who was unafraid to step into politics, who built a school in his hometown, who made these commercials from the time he first came into the league that established him as this other kind of character who was funny, who could act. And I think that that's why he'll be remembered in those two different ways, as this great player, but also as this great cultural figure in America.
So Bronny is what feels like the final chapter of LeBron in the NBA, and he's talked about wanting to play with Bronny. I'm all here for it. I'm already starting to hear the takes start to brew, and I don't expect Bronny to be or have the career that LeBron James has had. Now, not very many people would classify me as reasonable, but I think that's a very reasonable approach to Bronny's career. I don't expect Giannis Antetokounmpo to have LeBron James' career. Why would I expect Bronny to? But I'm very curious to see how that coverage goes and how this all plays out, because does he end up actually staying in the NBA long enough to play with him? What do you make of the Bronny situation and what he's said about it?
I think if you go back to one of the most impressive things to me about LeBron is about his experience as a father. Fatherhood has been something that's been, it's been at the forefront of LeBron's mind since he was a kid, when there was no father there. And I think his commitment to fatherhood has been obvious from the very beginning, when his firstborn son was a baby and would get brought to the games. And when he first started to learn to walk, he would walk over the bench and LeBron would put him on his lap during a game. I mean, his oldest son and then his subsequent two other children have been a big part of his career and his life. And I think what's interesting to me is there's so much pride on his part of being a dad and involving his kids in his life. It's legitimate. It's real. And I think that, to me, that legacy of his sort of the family man part of his life, to me, that's it's probably the most impressive part of his career. That's the older he gets and the more advanced he becomes as an NBA player, the more important that's become to him and the more paramount that's been in his picture. It's like the most important thing in his life, and it takes precedent over everything else. So it almost doesn't matter. I mean, how good his son becomes as an NBA player, I don't know how relevant that is. I think what you look at is, this is a dad who is incredibly proud about being a father.
Jeff Benedict, New York Times bestselling author, has written The Dynasty, inside the story of the Patriots, Robert Kraft, Bill Belichick, and Tom Brady. Tiger Woods, #1 New York Times bestseller, and the inspiration for the HBO documentary Quarterback, My Life Behind the Spiral, the autobiography of Steve Young, The System, the glory and scandal of big-time college football, and now LeBron. And he rightfully so picked the perfect picture from his wonderful days with the Miami Heat. So you've spent the last decade covering Brady, Tiger, LeBron. How are these three superstars similar, and how are they different?
The similar part, I think, is pretty easy to answer. I would describe these three men, LeBron, Tom, and Tiger, as master craftsmen. Every athlete works really hard at their profession, but these three they're just in a different category. I mean, LeBron could legitimately be called the MVP just about every year he's been in the league. You could say the same thing about Tom Brady, except for maybe 2008 when he was injured. And Tiger is Tiger. I think their commitment to excellence is unparalleled, whether it's how they condition their bodies, how they train, to their, just their determination and longevity. When you look at their personal lives, that's where you start to see a lot of distinctions and the uniquenesses about them, which is interesting. But I would say on the personal part of their lives, the thing that's, again, most impressive to me, similar to what we were just saying, is they're three world-class entertainers who haven't lost sight of their, number one responsibility as dads. I mean, I think their commitment to fatherhood is real, because when you look at world-class entertainers, that's something that usually gets left by the wayside. It easily gets forgotten and compromised. And these three guys haven't done that. I like the fact that they're so driven and almost maniacal in their professional pursuits as athletes. But there's one thing, and that's that now that they're dads and their kids are growing up, you see that's where you see, wow, they're very much alike in that category.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff Benedict, author of LeBron. I have the book here. I'm very excited. I've already finished the first chapter, which, as I said, I loved, although my experience was very different as a Heat fan. So Heat fans, a lot of you follow me. So go on ahead and get the book and get started. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeff. I can't wait to get into the rest of the book.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd, or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.